Hey, this is Ken Behrens with Tropical Birding, and today I'll take you on a virtual birding tour of Vietnam. Vietnam is this pretty big country in Southeast Asia with a very unusual shape. See, it's very long and skinny from north to south, runs all the way from China way down into the South China Sea. It's part of a region called Indochina, along with Cambodia and Laos, and there's quite a few sort of lowland forest endemic birds in Indochina. And you also have mountains running all the way down the western side of Vietnam, and there's a bunch of endemic birds in those mountains. There's more endemic birds in that region than anywhere else in Southeast Asia, so it's a pretty exciting place for a birder to visit. This shows the route of Tropical Birding's tour. There's a main tour, which is in the south, and then there's an extension in central Vietnam. Now, this is a birding with a camera tour, and that means we mix more traditional birding, like walking along a road, looking for birds and mammals, maybe taking photos opportunistically, with time in hides, with feeder setups and water. And this is really a wonderful combination in Vietnam. Vietnam's a tough place for birding. There's a lot of hunting, there's a lot of trapping, and so this time in the hides allows you to see a lot of birds that are really tough otherwise, and really even birders are going to want to do the hides. So this tour is suitable both for birders and for photographers. This shows the area of the southern main tour. This is Ho Chi Minh City, which most people still call Saigon. And we drive from Saigon a few hours to this big block of forest called Cat Tien National Park. It's the best protected national park in Vietnam. There is semi-evergreen forest there, so it's similar to a rainforest, but it's a little bit drier. You can see there's leaf litter, and a lot of the big trees lose their leaves during the dry season. By far the most diverse place we go on the tour. It has tons of cool Asian, Southeast Asian lowland birds. And one classic example is the broadbills. This is the big dusky broadbill. You also have black and red broadbill. It's often around water. And banded broadbill. It's a canopy bird. Beautiful, wonderful birds. Asia just has so many of these great looking birds. We stay at a lodge that's inside of the national park, right on the banks of a river. It's got very comfortable rooms, good food, and excellent birding right on the balcony. The lodge is also full of these big geckos called tokai geckos. It's hard to tell from this photo, but they are enormous. They're almost 2 feet long, and they're incredibly loud. And they make this call, tokai, tokai, which is really cool most of the time, not so cool when they wake you up in the middle of the night. Cat Tien is the best national park in Vietnam for mammals, and the star mammal is the black-shanked Duke langur. It's a beautiful monkey. There are also some bigger mammals, like sambar. Sambar is the Asian equivalent of the North American European elk. Another one of the star mammals is a yellow-cheeked or buff-cheeked gibbon. Now, the first time I ever heard gibbons in a forest in Southeast Asia, I had absolutely no idea what they were, and I heard this sound and I was like, what on earth is that? And I chased them down, and then I saw these spectacular long-legged monkeys. So I'll let you hear the sound here so you have an idea what an incredible experience it is to hear these monkeys in the wild. I played, if you've seen my Madagascar virtual birding tour, you have heard the indri, which I think is one of the world's great natural sounds. But I think the gibbon is up there as well. Cat Tien has a lot of woodpeckers, which range from dinky little black and buff woodpecker up to the huge white-bellied woodpecker. There are only 4 ioras in the world. It's a small family of Asian birds, and 2 of those are found in Cat Tien National Park. This is the great iora. Cat Tien is good for trogons. This is an orange-breasted trogon, and you can also see red-headed trogon. So I mentioned this is a birding with a camera tour. We split our time between traditional birding and birding in hides. Hides is where we see some of the most difficult and shy birds, such as the blue-naped pitta. This is a typical hide. And this is a typical hide visitor. This is puff-throated babbler. It's sort of the Asian equivalent of the North American ovenbird. Here's a migratory bird which visits from the north, a Siberian blue robin. Here's one of the big prizes, the Siamese fireback. These Asian pheasants are among the most sought after birds for birders, and it's easy to see why. They're just spectacular birds. Here's another migratory bird, the white-throated rock thrush. Now I think the female, which is shown here, is actually the far cooler bird compared with the male. You can decide for yourself. Here's the male. It's also a pretty good looking bird. Another one of the big target birds is Bellied Pitta. You can actually see 2 pittas in Cat Tien. I showed you the blue-naped, and then this is the other one, the Bellied Pitta. Fantastic bird. Unique color scheme. And I love the way they flick their tails up and down. All the pittas do that. Here's a very common bird, but another wonderful bird, the black-crested bulbul. I love the way they flick their crest up and down. Big, long, towering crest. You just get fantastic views of everything in these hides. And sometimes it's quiet, but you always have this feeling that anything might show up at any moment. It's really exciting. Here's another one of the big prizes. This is Jermaine's peacock pheasant. And it's one of these birds that the more you look at it, the more wonderful detail you see. It's just got this galaxy of detail. Here's a little video to show you what it looks like as it moves around. Might be photobombed by Indochinese ground squirrels, or maybe a striped-throated bulbul. Happens a lot. Hides are actually really good for mammals, for smaller mammals. This is the slender-tailed tree shrew. Looks a bit like a squirrel, but it's actually in a completely different family, the tree shrew family. And the Indochinese ground squirrel is really common. Cute little squirrel. They love that pheasant grain. So here's Cat Tien, and moving on from Cat Tien, you drive up into the mountains. This here is the Dalat Plateau, and we bird here at a place called the Teelin Pass. It's quite an exciting time in the tour because you can suddenly start to see a whole bunch of montane birds, endemics and near endemics. One example is the gray-crowned bush tit. Indochinese barbet is suddenly very common. You hear them everywhere. Teelin is the best place on the tour for one of my favorite birds in Asia, the long-tailed broadbill. It's really like a cartoon character come to life. This video will give you a little feel for their personality. Great birds. So from Teelin we drive the rest of the way up onto the Dalat Plateau proper. This is a mountain plateau that's about 7,000 feet tall. It's also a good-sized city these days. It's a big domestic tourism destination within Vietnam. Dalat has these wonderful twisted alleys full of motorbikes and little coffee shops. A fascinating place just to wander around and explore. Sometimes I go incognito, wander through the alleys. I don't think anybody notices me. Dalat is a big coffee growing area, and there's some really cool coffee shops with wonderful coffee. This is the biggest coffee shop I've ever seen. It's the size of like 3 barns. It's huge and it has great coffee. This is a more traditional countryside coffee shop where they put hammocks up. It's very relaxed. Dalat has quite a French colonial feel to it, as evidenced by this French style mile marker along the road. There's 2 major habitats. One is the drier pine forest, and the other one is broadleaf forest. Broadleaf forest is by far the richer habitat for birds. So we do, just like in Katien, a mix of normal birding and birding in hides. When we are sort of walking along roads and trails, we're looking for the Vietnamese Kutia. This is one of these special endemic birds. It's in the laughing thrush family, but it acts like a giant nuthatch. There's an endemic subspecies of red crossbill only on Dalat, which is likely to be split eventually as the Vietnamese crossbill. There's an endemic subspecies of greenback tit, which may be split as Langbian tit. One of the places we visit is shown here. It's called the Ta Nung Valley. It used to be just a normal little rural road, but then some kind of evil genius turned it into a sort of selfie Disneyland. And the whole thing is just built around places to take selfies. So this one is not a real tree. That's a fake pink plastic tree, and every single person who walks by takes selfies there. Here's another great selfie attraction, Big Hand. Also makes a good canopy tower for birders. The reason for visiting this silly place is that it's the best place for the gray-crowned croceus, which is another rare endemic. It's also in the laughing thrush family. It's also a good spot for hill prinia and red-vented barbet. Big, spectacular barbet. The hides are actually where we see most of the toughest birds, the shy pittas and some of the scarce endemic laughing thrushes. So here's a look at one of the hides. Some fabulous hides. Nobody would want to miss these, whether you're a birder or a photographer. There's countless prizes that we're looking for. One of them is spotted forktail. Forktails are some of my favorite Asian birds, and they're generally incredibly shy, almost impossible to photograph. So seeing these things at maybe 10 feet away from a hide is just such a treat. I love the way that crest kind of bobs up and down on these guys. Such cool birds. Occasionally you see slaty-legged crake. I love the way they move. They're like glue being extruded from an almost dry tube, and then sometimes they speed up when they freak out. One of the most common birds is a large notava. Another beautiful flycatcher is the verditor flycatcher. It's like a sky blue wood pewee. White-browed scimitar babblers are frequent visitors. Really charismatic birds, lots of character, and capable of eating incredible amounts of mealworms. One of the big star birds is a blue pitta. This is a female blue pitta. Again, some of these birds are almost impossible to see in the forest, away from these hides. This is the male blue pitta. Such a beautiful bird. This is a gray-bellied Teesia. Funny little, virtually tailless bird. Here you can see it in action. There's just always such a sense of excitement in these hides. You don't know what's going to show up, and you often have an idea there's some targets coming in like a pitta or something, and you have to wait for it. And it's so satisfying when the pitta actually comes in. You see it hopping at the back of the little open area, and then it comes right in front of you. It's just so exciting. There can be a bit of boredom, but it is well made up for when you have those moments of adrenaline when some incredible bird comes in. Here's one of those incredible birds, collared laughing thrush. It's endemic to Dalat, and it's arguably the best looking laughing thrush in the world. And there's actually another endemic laughing thrush too, orange-breasted laughing thrush. Beautiful understated bird. Very hard to see away from these hides. This is one of my favorites. It's currently called the short-tailed scimitar babbler on the Clements list, but it's definitely not a scimitar babbler. It's a wren babbler. It's actually a rimitor. So there's one rimitor in the eastern Himalayas, and there's one in Sumatra, and there's this one in the middle in Indochina. Oh, got scared away by a slaty-legged crake. This is one of the most amazing birds of the hides. It's rusty-naped pitta. This is one of the most difficult birds in Asia. There's people who spent decades birding in Asia, never seen this thing. And suddenly, with the advent of these hides, it becomes a relatively easy thing to see. Incredible. So out of the hides, back in town, one of the great parts of this tour is that the food is just fantastic. This is the national dish of pho. It's basically a noodle stew with meat, and you can dress it up with all these great condiments. There are just noodle shops everywhere, and they're all good. Here's some Vietnamese barbecue. Fantastic stuff. You can definitely skip the chicken legs if you're not into that sort of thing. Vietnamese is a pretty tricky language. If you were relying on Google Translate to try to order from this menu, you probably wouldn't do very well. So we wrap up the main tour in Dalat. Folks who are not doing the extension drive back to Saigon, and then people doing the Central Vietnam extension fly up to Da Nang, Central Vietnam. Da Nang is quite a nice city right on the waterfront. Give you a little feel for what Da Nang is like. Lots of cool little cafes and coffee shops. The city is right here, and right next to the city is this peninsula called the Trung Peninsula, which holds a small population of red-shanked Duke langur, which I think is the world's best looking primate. Look at the face of this animal, just amazing. Might also see some common birds like the crimson sunbird, common lowland bird. So from Da Nang we head south to a couple areas in the hills and mountains. The first place we go is called Mang Dan. Big target bird at Mang Dan is the chestnut-eared laughing thrush. Really tough bird, really shy, no hides. Have to do it the old-fashioned way. Mang Dan is great for yellow-billed nuthatch. Really, really localized bird. Quite common. Get flocks with birds like yellow-cheeked tit. Rufous-faced warbler is a pretty common bamboo specialist. From Mang Dan, we go a little bit north up to Ngoc Linh, which is a big mountain. And Ngoc Linh has a few specialty birds like the localized near-endemic black-crowned barwing. And it also has some wonderful laughing thrushes. This is the red-tailed laughing thrush and the golden-winged laughing thrush. This one is endemic not just to Vietnam, but to this one mountain. It's a very, very localized bird. Goklen also has some birds with a definite Himalayan flavor, like a red-tailed minla and black-eared shrike babbler. So we head north again, we go through Da Nang, and then you see there's this coastal mountain range here. Part of it's protected in this national park called Bac Ma. And although you're right next to the heavily populated coastal plain, it's just a different world of cloud forest, mist, beautiful forest, tough birding, but really cool place to visit. It was an old French colonial hill station, which is half abandoned. And it has this kind of ghost town feel to it. Birding is tough, but there's lots of cool birds. One of the things we look for up there is the endemic subspecies of sultan tit. It has a black crest. The normal sultan tits have a yellow crest. This one has a black crest. It's not endemic to the Bac Ma, but it's endemic to central Vietnam. The Indochinese Yuhina is quite common. So from Bac Ma we head north up along the coast to the last place in the tour, which is Pong Naki Bang National Park. Along the way we might stop at a cool coffee shop like this one. The landscape at Pong Na is limestone karst covered in forest. It's one of the most spectacular landscapes in the world, I think, because these mountains are almost vertical. They just come straight out of the plain. Really classic, unique Asian landscape. And the limestone has some specialty birds. My favorite one is sooty babbler. Really unique bird. What I love about this bird is it looks like it's wearing goggles. Another limestone specialist is a limestone leaf warbler. As is typical of areas with limestone, there's also big caves, and one of these has a really good walkway. It's well lit, quite spectacular. And amazingly, there's 4G network down inside of this cave. Vietnam has incredible cellular network. So that wraps up the tour that Tropical Birding does as a birding with a camera tour. We drive down to the city of Hue and we take a domestic flight to Saigon, and then you can catch your outbound international departures from there. I'm going to tell you a little bit about a few other sites up in North Vietnam. These are places that we might include on future tours, and they're also available for custom tours. The first place is Cuc Phong. This is Vietnam's first national park, oldest national park. It has a semi-tropical forest, and there's a lot of limestone. You can see another limestone specialist here, the limestone wren babbler. There are also some new hide setups at Cuc Phong, and you can see some different birds than what you see down south, like Fujian Niltava, the migratory rufous-tailed robin. You can also see blue-naped pitta. It's a different subspecies here from the one down south. One exciting development at Cuc Phong is there's a new hide where you can see this enigmatic partridge. It's currently considered part of scaly-breasted partridge, but it's probably worthy of being split as a new species called Tonkin partridge. And like many of these things with hides, it used to be almost impossible to see, and now that you have a good chance at a hide. The next place I'll tell you about is this isolated mountain of Ba Vi. There's beautiful forest there, broadleaf forest, and there's a big temple on top, and it's a good place to see a few different birds, such as a small niltava. And then the last place I'll tell you about is Van Long Wetland Reserve, which is between Hanoi and Cuc Phuong. It's a big wetland, and above the wetland there are these towering limestone mountains. It's absolutely spectacular setting. You explore by boat. This will give you a feel for what it's like. It's quite magical. You're looking for birds like bitterns, lapwings, prinias, reed warblers. And then the big target here is actually a monkey, which is the critically endangered Delacour's langur. Big black and white monkey that lives up on the limestone karst. Well, that wraps up the tour. I'll tell you a little bit more about it just in case you're thinking of taking this tour in the future. The south is very easy. It's physically easy, the accommodation's really good, the food's really good. The central Vietnam extension has harder birding, the accommodation is a little bit more basic, not terrible, and the food's a little bit more basic as well. So it's moderate overall. So the south is very easy, the central stuff is moderate, and the northern sites that I mentioned are also moderate. I hope to see you on a real birding tour of Vietnam at some point, and thanks for watching. The next tour that I'll be doing, probably released in about a week, will be Ethiopia. A whole different world, so I hope you'll join me on that tour as well.